Hi, welcome to Pride in Action Stories. My name is Caitlin. I'm a member of the Pride in Action Network Committee, and my pronouns are she, her. Today, my guest is Megan. Megan, would you be able to introduce yourself?
My name is Dr. Megan Sharp. I am a research fellow in the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences, and I'm also the co-chair staff for the Pride in Action Network. My pronouns are she, her.
Thank you so much. Now, your work intersects a lot with LGBTQIA plus people. Can you tell us a bit about the work that you do?
Sure. So broadly, I am a sociologist, and so I'm really interested in inequality and how inequality is perpetrated in a variety of different sites and scenes and spaces and places. Um, my background is in, I guess, the field of music subcultures. I noticed, being a researcher, but also a participant of punk sites, where I did my PhD, that there was quite a lot of inequality, particularly around LGBTIQA plus representation, or representation of people of color and people with disabilities. And so I wrote about that for my doctoral thesis. I then came to University of Melbourne and noticed that those same inequalities were being reproduced in this sort of really institutionalized setting. And so I sought to challenge those inequities by kind of applying some of the same principles around safety, cultural humility, being culturally nimble, education, training, awareness, these things that I saw happening in punk that were really effective, trying to apply them in a higher education setting.
Great. Can you tell us about culturally nimble was a term that you used. What do you mean by that?
It's a term that is often used in research, particularly around, Indigenous studies and Indigenous Australian health and health practitioners. So this idea that instead of being culturally competent and assuming or somehow having the assumption that you can achieve a competency in someone else's culture, understanding that you need to be humble, but also have the ability to learn and relearn and adapt to different situations, to changing terminology, to changing health patterns, and that you have the desire and the drive to want to be adaptable.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a really helpful concept, particularly for the Pride in Action Network, which is an ally network and seeks to kind of encourage people to have just what you're saying, to be culturally nimble, I think, and keep learning. One of the challenges in this space, I think, is the English language and sort of constantly battling and negotiating the English language, and we end up with these, long acronyms like LGBTQIA+. But I think there's also some really great work that you do that addresses very specific identities. And recently you did some work on non-binary identities. I was wondering if you could tell us what that means and what your work involved.
Sure. So I recently published a book chapter with a good friend of mine, soon to be Dr. Barry Shannon. And Barry and I worked together at the University of Newcastle, and our research really intersected when I was doing my punk stuff and they were doing their stuff about LGBTI sex education. And we found that in both of our studies, non-binary people were using the internet in these really kind of dynamic and, I guess, new ways to think about their gender, think about their expression, think about their bodies and their friendships and their support networks. And so we published this book chapter called Becoming Non-Binary, and it's an exploration of gender work on the site Tumblr. And we sort of found in that non-binary people who do not consider themselves or understand themselves to be male or female, were kind of curating from the ground up these identities which they felt suited them in a way that others did not, and they found community and belonging online and resources online, and they kind of looked at they were able to have privacy in their own space to look at other people's bodies and think about, these kind of technologies of the self where we could manipulate certain parts of our body, our voice, our mannerisms, and kind of try on different identities and different identity markers to work out what suited and what felt good, and what was joyful, and what was kind of what made it easier for non-binary people to go out into the physical world and not be so fearful of, or not feel like it was such a risk to present in a gender non-conforming way. So the internet provided this amazing resource to kind of practice in a safe space with people who cared about you and cared about your desire before you kind of hopped on the tram as a gender non-conforming person.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting, and I think has been looked at in a few different kind of online spaces and with some different identities, but that's really important, looking specifically at that area and the non-binary identity especially. I would like to ask you as well just about allyship, and you're sort of hinting at this idea of safety and negotiating spaces and how challenging that can be. And the Pride in Action Network is an ally network that's trying to encourage allyship. And I was wondering if there's any ways that you've experienced allyship or seen allyship in your work or in your workplace that you'd like to share.
I think I think the average person who is an ally thinks that everyone knows they're an ally. I think it's imagined that being an ally is the kind of neutral position of most people that I've encountered whom I work with or whom I come into contact with on, a day-to-day basis. And I think that for queer people, allyship is not neutral. And it's not the standard that of course it's what you expect of people, but there is always a risk that new people that you meet, or even people that you've known for a while, are not going to be your ally. And so safety really lies in kind of not telling anyone about your identity until you're absolutely sure that person doesn't present a risk or a threat to you. I think that it's really important for allies to be visible. There's no way for me to know that you are supportive of particular genders and sexual orientations without some kind of visible marker to indicate as such. And I think that, in a workplace, like perhaps this isn't so important in people's regular everyday lives, but in the workplace, I think it's really important that people show their support and their allyship until such time as all, queer and trans and intersex people feel that a neutral position is being an ally. We need to be visibly letting others know that we're allies, and we need to call out behaviour of people who express kind of homophobic or transphobic views. It's great to support queer people, but one of the ways that we, really need to kind of harness our energy is by alerting other people to when they are, facilitating homophobic or transphobic or biphobic or, intersex phobic language and action and sentiment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the great things about the network in just the past year has been seeing people wearing more and more the lanyards, the rainbow lanyards, and just that visible sign that, that person at least knows something and at least is going to try to be a good ally. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you for telling us about it on Pride in Action Stories.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me, Caitlin.